Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Boozer. I'm with CUGC HQ, and I am happy to welcome you to today's Connect webinar with IGEL. We're going to talk about how IGEL and Citrix combined can enable and accelerate your move to cloud-optimized endpoints. So I think it's going to be a really interesting presentation, and I know we have a demo as part of the presentation today. But before we get started, I want to introduce who's on the call with us. We have Simon Townsend and Jeff Kalberg. Can you flip the slide for me? Yep, thank you. So Jeff is a technology evangelist with IGEL. I think he's been at the company for quite some time. And Simon Townsend is the CMO. And both of these guys, you can see their Twitter handles if you'd like to follow them on Twitter. But before I give things over to them to get us started, I also want to introduce our moderator. With us today is DJ Eshelman. He is one of our CUGC leaders in Nashville, Tennessee. DJ is going to keep an eye on the questions for us today. And I'm sorry, can you switch that slide for me real quick?
There we go.
Thank you so much. We have a combined deck, ladies and gentlemen. So this is what we have with live TV, right? DJ is a CTA. He's also under the Twitter handle, the Citrix Coach. So you can follow him on Twitter. And like I said, he's going to keep an eye on your questions. So if you'll type those in the question box, he'll watch those. He'll ask those as they pop up during the presentation. If they make sense as we're going along, some of those we may hold to the end, depending on what the questions are. So go ahead and type them in, though, as you have them. DJ, you want to say hello?
Hello, welcome everybody.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Simon and Jeff to tell you a little bit more about themselves and IGEL and get us started. There you go, guys.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephanie. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. Before we kick off with our presentation today, and I'm going to hand over to Jeff in a second, we just wanted to make everybody aware of both an event, but also a competition that we're running during the course of this webinar. Our IGEL Disrupt End User Computing event in 2019 is running in January and February of 2019. They take place in Munich and then one over in the Silicon Valley. This is the second year we've been doing these events, and they've got about anywhere over 400 to 500 attendees. And they're a great way to understand what we're doing as an organization in 2019, but also an event very much focused on end user computing, so covering topics around Citrix, what Microsoft is doing, what people like NVIDIA and Nutanix are doing in the market. And we've got a whole host of very well-known community folks attending and presenting during the course of those 3 days as well. There's a chance to get trained up, both commercially and technically. There's a chance to get certification as well. They are chargeable events normally, but anybody that is on this webinar and enters using the link that we give out at the end of this webinar goes into a free draw, and we will make sure that we get you an all expenses paid trip to one of those Disrupt events. So at least one of you on this webinar will win that opportunity to come and see us either in Munich or Silicon Valley. So yeah, stay tuned, and with that I think we'll progress on to the next slide, and I'll let Jeff introduce himself.
So my name's Jeff Kalberg. Glad everybody could make this today, and hopefully we'll make the next hour productive for you and teach you a few things about IGEL and what we see going on in the market, and how we at IGEL respond to that. So kind of breaking this apart in three simple areas, kind of a quick review of the state of the end user computing market, what's going on, what IGEL's offering and solutions are, and then of course a demo This is always great doing live demos. We're always waiting for a Bill Gates kind of moment. So we'll see what happens here. First things first. Nobody can respond, but I usually ask, who knows what this is? And of course, it doesn't take long for people to say, well, that's the elephant in the room, and which is what we're going to talk about right now. And the elephant in the room is Windows on the desktop. And as we think about Windows on the desktop, we'd like to remind everybody, as if none of us know this, that support for Windows 7 is finally ending. We've been waiting for this moment. Now it's rising upon us and coming at us very, very quickly here. We have a year to go. Well, you won't be completely out of the woods. You'll still be able to pay a lot of money for some extended support of Windows 7. But at the end of the day, it's time to move on, and we're all struggling with that. As of midsummer, roughly half of the users on the planet had moved to Windows 10, and so we had a lot more to go. And I know pretty much everybody I've ever talked to is in the process of making the move, but also struggling with how to do that. So I like to ask people who remembers when Windows 10 was introduced. There was a Microsoft development evangelist when Microsoft introduced Windows 10. Jerry Nixon was his name, and he said, and this is a direct quote, "Right now, we're releasing Windows 10. And because Windows 10 is the last version of Windows, we're all still working on Windows 10. My translation, we're moving to Windows as a service. And we're going to release more versions of Windows more often than ever before, turn your life upside down, and at a level of operating expense never seen before." I think this is really what we've seen going on here in this industry. Let's go back to this. Since Windows 10 was introduced, okay, if you didn't subscribe to the long-term servicing branch, we'll talk about that in a minute, and you realize there have been 7 individual versions of Windows 10 released so far on a 6-month release cycle. We go back and we look at these and we count the number of builds within each of these versions. I haven't gone back and counted the previous version, but at the end of the day, it's an incredible number of builds, and there's been over 150 individual builds of the Windows 10 that have been released if someone wanted to play around with all of those, okay? At the end of the day, we have these 7 major builds, okay, that we've been forced to move off of and move ahead because these are only supported for a period of time.
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry, I was just going to say, Jeff, I think I think you raise a really good point, which, as I go out and speak to a lot of organizations, one of the challenges that people are facing at the moment is how do they keep up with that cadence of updates, right? And Microsoft themselves only this year have changed their stance on that, right? Stating that the fall update of Windows 10 updates will now be supported for a longer period of time than the the April, the March-April release of them as well. So whilst organizations now have got a little bit longer to deploy, let's say 1809, and then have it out there in the wild and supported for longer, the truth of the fact is that some organizations, particularly those at scale, they're having to deploy these multiple deployment rings. They're having to have some users on early access code, early adopters code. Application compatibility still causes a problem. And then as they finish rolling out one version of Windows 10, they've got to go back round and start all over again. And it's that change that Windows 10 as a service brings on the endpoint, from being a CapEx cost to being an OpEx cost, that I think is causing lots of organizations to perhaps rethink their strategy of what they've got on the endpoint. So, but maybe what you're going to talk about now, Jeff, helps a little bit with that for some.
Well, and of course, and we'll get to that, and yeah, because then we had, of course, the long-term servicing branch, which I know, of course, at IGEL we adopted. For those people that run Windows 10. But the long-term servicing branch was a brilliant idea. Microsoft recognizes that enterprises like stability. So they say, hey, listen, we're going to introduce this version, and we'll go ahead and provide security patches and fixes to that operating system for an extended period of time. And we will then release on a 3-year cycle the next version. So we're due to see the next version of long-term servicing branch, if we see it at all, I think end of summer of 2019, so next year. maybe delays, but at the end of the day, that we'll see the next version of this. The problem and the fine print is that Microsoft is only committing, okay, to supporting the currently marketed silicon in the industry. So if there's older chipsets that are out there that work with, say, the Windows 10, the second release of the long-term servicing branch, there's no guarantee that it's going to work with the next version. So this is it's an interesting dilemma for people that have gone down this. And I've seen some organizations move off of the long-term servicing branch and go back to the 6-month release cycle. And as you said, with Simon, with the extended support, that's going to be helpful. You can read all about this at the Windows Lifecycle fact sheet if you want to get into it some more. So, one of the other interesting things was back in March of this year was the whole announcement with Microsoft reorganizing and essentially tearing up the Windows desktop business and taking the Windows 10 team, okay, which is one of 3 basic profit centers at Microsoft. It's putting half of these people in Azure and half of these people in the Office 365, because guess what? Microsoft says, the desktop isn't so important anymore. The Windows workload is important, but how we're using it and where it's coming from is changing. So we all know the feeling of Windows on the desktop. We've been here, okay? For those that might be difficult to see, but this is on update 11 of like 279. We've all watched this happen with Windows 7. We've all felt this way about with our Windows systems at times. In fact, I was this morning I was experiencing an update myself, and I was watched it run for 20 minutes as I'm thinking about getting ready for this. So it can be a challenge. So Windows on the desktop, why do we care? Well, we care, and what are we going to do about it? We care because there still is a tremendous amount of workload. I mean, Office 365, there are applications that are out there that we use today, Salesforce, others. These are all browser-based kind of oriented kind of applications. But at the end of the day, they make up a small portion of what we use in business, okay? And so all of these other applications that we have still need a Windows operating system to be running, okay? But at the same time, having Windows out on that desktop is a challenge. So what does IGEL say? What does Citrix say? And what do we do about it? So Windows on the desktop, we say, hey, listen, Windows 10, it's clear, okay? What we really need to do is keep Windows in the data center, with all the updates, with all the patching, with all of the testing of applications, with the need to perhaps roll back if we encounter an issue. I mean, the only way that makes sense to do this is to move the Windows workload into the cloud. Now, it might be a public cloud, it might be a private cloud, it might be a private cloud on a public server, but whatever the case may be, let's move Windows to the cloud, okay? Let's not waste our money and use Windows to access Windows, because if I leave Windows on the endpoint, okay, to connect Windows in the data center, well, I still have to manage Windows on the endpoint. So as long as Windows sits out there, it presents a management issue and challenges around that. And then we'll say work with winning organizations. So adopting Citrix and adopting IGEL technology is certainly a great way to go, and that's our plug for the day. So, what's Microsoft saying? So we think about this future. Microsoft. Simon, you might want to talk about this because you were, I think, involved in at the announcement period. But Microsoft has announced.
Yeah, I mean, if you scroll back to Ignite this year, I mean, this is the first time I can think of where Microsoft have, dare I say, validated this market that, me, Jeff, all of you guys that are on this webinar, the Citrix community and Citrix themselves have been working in for the last 15, 20 years. It wasn't that long ago that Microsoft, sure, they created, RDSH. They gave us a form of a broker, but arguably they didn't have dedicated sales teams and very small engineering teams on what is the VDI terminal services type of market. They let Citrix deal with that space, and for all of us that have been in this market for a very, very long time, Microsoft has been there as the underlying technology, but it's never truly come out and validated that it agreed or wanted to promote. But obviously this year at Ignite, Microsoft have now made a number of announcements. One of those is Windows virtual desktops. Again, moving those Windows workloads off the endpoint into the data center onto Azure. Subsequently in the last couple of weeks, they've made further acquisitions in this space, the likes of FS Logics, who enhance user experience and allow them to deploy Office 365 into that environment far easier and more effectively. And so for me, regardless of whether everybody suddenly starts purchasing Windows desktops on Azure, Windows virtual desktops or not, what it really does validate is that Microsoft themselves, much like all of us that are in the Citrix community are on this webinar right now. I mean, they're basically turned a corner. They're saying, well, maybe it is the right place to put your Windows workloads into the data center on shared infrastructure and offer them out via remoting protocols. So for me, it's going to be a really interesting 2019. It definitely raises the awareness of what we've all been doing for the last 15, 20 years in this space up to the C level. And so I think lots of organizations will now be looking at, is there a better, different, disruptive way in which I can deploy my Windows workloads? And that obviously includes everything that everybody on this webinar does for a living, right?
Right, very good. So going back to what does IGEL say and what is IGEL's value proposition here and what do we offer? Okay, well, here's what we say to people. Okay, being in this industry, we all have everybody has a strategy, has had a strategy for their storage, they've had a strategy for their network, they've had a strategy for their servers, they've had a strategy for their applications and how they deliver those applications. But quite often, people don't include the endpoint discussion, until after everything else is in place, or maybe it gets passing attention. But from our perspective, we think that endpoint strategy should be every bit part of the discussion from the beginning, especially when some of the tools that IGEL makes available can help move budget into the server components, into the services components to ensure that what you end up having is a well-rounded kind of high-performing virtualization environment. Obviously, we talk about from an IGEL perspective, we talked about it before, all of these operating systems, all these various versions of Windows, the early releases, the testing and everything. When we now are supporting users and we always have to ask the question, what version of Windows? Do you have this patch? Was your system offline? I mean, there's so many things going on and it's chaos. It results in waste of time. We're paying for licensing products. We're paying for products to help manage all of these operating systems and keep everything up to speed and working properly. And then in the end, users can't do their work, users get upset, we have lost productivity. If a user can't work for 2 days because their system's down, that prevents them from doing their work, it creates stress. I mean, it's just not a smart way to go. IGEL, what we have, okay, and we bring to the table is we have an operating system, we call it IGEL OS. Okay, it is a Linux-based operating system, but it's built with the enterprise in mind and managing endpoints in mind. Okay, with the management system, with the IGEL operating system and what comes along with it from the management perspective, it takes all of that endpoint management and brings it into the data center where it can be handled very, very efficiently, okay, and make everybody's life much easier. In the end, by adopting IGEL and the tools that we have, you get simple management. You hardly even need to think about it. I mean, you basically set up the environment and it runs until the day you need it, okay, in which case you have powerful tools to manipulate and to work with endpoint devices. It's smart, okay, because the return on investment is increased significantly because of what we bring to the table from an endpoint management standpoint and from a secure operating system, and allowing you to put more money into the delivery platform, into the virtualization environment to make sure everybody has great experiences, okay? And then security, putting a read-only operating system out there that has all sorts of built-in controls around certificates and hashes and other things that we do to make sure that operating system is not hacked or changed in any way, shape, or form. This is what we bring to the table for users. How do you take advantage of IGEL? As I mentioned before, this IGEL operating system. It begins with the operating system. And you can install the IGEL operating system on any asset that you already own. If it's a 64-bit x86 device, okay? It's x86 instruction set, whether it's AMD or Intel or some other brand. but the IGEL software can install on that device 64-bit x86 if there's 2 gig of RAM. Okay, you're going to be 98% sure that the IGEL software is going to run on that device. Okay, and be supported. You can also get the IGEL operating system with one of our physical thin clients. We do make thin clients. Making a thin client is not something who IGEL is, it's something we do. Okay, it just happens that we make thin client devices. There was a period of time in our history during the mid-90s where we didn't make any thin clients, but we licensed our software to the companies. Well, there was a company called Compaq who used to use the IGEL software on their thin clients. So they've since gone away, as we know. And then, of course, we have the UD Pocket, which is a micro, the world's smallest thin client. It's the size of your thumbnail. It is a live USB stick using secure boot technology and everything else that we built into our operating system. It's just another way to consume the IGEL operating system. A great way for people who are on the road, work-at-home users, somebody who wants to work at home. A contractor comes on site and they want to connect your network. You say, hey, listen, you're not going to connect your machine to our network, but here, you give this and I'll give you a desktop you can work with. And then, of course, we wanted to take a quick moment here to let everybody kind of digest all of the partners and some of the many partners that we work with, okay, with the IGEL technology. Just kind of talk about that. Simon, you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, most people on this call will know that, I've been following IGEL for probably the last 15, 20 years, but I've only recently joined in the last 5 weeks. And I think one of the reasons that I was attracted and feel privileged about working for IGEL is, it comes down to this point that ultimately we are a software platform. We are an operating system and a management platform first and foremost, and not what I would typically call a thin client manufacturer. Our thin client manufacturing business continues to do very well, and people buy our hardware from us. But we've got far more people working on the operating system than we have, as an example, building pieces of hardware for us. And when you look at the IGEL business and what it's doing now, particularly in a lot of small to medium up to enterprise size of accounts, it's the software, the operating system, the management of that operating system that is really starting to make a difference. And this operating system is one of the unique things that IGEL has to offer, and it's these integrations with third parties that is allowing us to be deployed into a myriad of different heterogeneous types of environments, whether we're being installed on other third-party thin clients, whether we're being installed on old machines that we need to prolong the life of, or whether it's onto new equipment that needs interaction with some of these other technologies like Plantronics, like Sennheiser, organizations that are looking to monitor their Citrix environments with things like Lakeside, to manage printing with things like PrinterLogic. It's because those technologies are integrated into our operating system that really starts to make the difference. And I suppose I just wanted to make sure that we'd called that out on this call, which is, it's less about mean time between failures and power consumption of thin client devices, and more about what's going on at an operating system level.
Correct. Okay, and then finally, the other proposition is, of course, the IGEL operating system in and of itself is very powerful, very flexible, very adaptable to what people want to do, being able to use that for all sorts of solutions. But management, okay, is the key piece that changes everything. It is really the game changer. It is the differentiator. It is the secret sauce, if you will, of the IGEL solution and the ability to manage that. And it's going to be important. I'll be sharing that with you here shortly. And then we have the IGEL Cloud Gateway. So as I ask you, as I show you the management system, think about the fact that everything you're seeing, okay, will extend, just as you're seeing it, it will extend to any devices that you own. If they're connected to the network, the internet being the network, okay, and they have a path back to your management system, you have complete control of that device and the ability to manage it as if it was on the secure network. So the cloud gateway is a connecting point for device management. In the end, with the Agile Management Suite and the Agile Operating System and the Cloud Gateway, brings everything together into a simple system where everything is under control of the IT professional, which is, of course, all of us on this call today. And it does make our life quite different in terms of what we can do. And we can start to think about more important projects, okay? I'm not going to spend a lot of time. It's a very important piece, but it's almost an entire conversation in and by itself about security. But security is very important to us, being a German company. You know, the whole GDPR that we all have to deal with today is based on the German security requirement, and so it is something we're all living by. But you know, 2017 was a banner year for security, and we decided to take a stance that was kind of a three-pronged or six-pronged approach to security. Management being key, because there will come a time when you need to touch your devices and deal with them, and you need good, strong management for that purpose. Security auditing is the ability for us in charge of end user computing to be able to say to the security people that I am providing a secure environment, okay? We say, hey, we're charged with giving end users applications and tools to do their job, and the security people are in charge. It's their job to tell us no, and that always seems to be the case. Our approach is to be able to provide tools and mechanisms for you to sit there and say to the security people, here is the posture of our thin client devices. This is an approach that we're starting to use at IGEL, and we'll be rolling that out as the years unfold, as the years move forward. We're also working to qualify partners. It's very important if you're you're deploying Citrix. It's really important that you know that we, if there's an issue, we're talking to Citrix, and Citrix is talking to us. So I spent the entire day yesterday on-site at Citrix working with engineers on some of the technology integrations that we're working on and how these things get deployed. So we have a very, very strong relationship with them, and this is beneficial. But by being qualified, it's an open relationship, and you know we're working together, and we have a avenue for support if something is not working properly, and it goes both ways, and it's very important. Contextual security, very important. You know, if you're not where you're supposed to be, or the machine's not where it's supposed to be, or you're not who you're supposed to be, I mean, we want devices to be secure based on context. And this is something we're starting to see more and more of, okay? Proven security at IGEL, we made a commitment as the next year unfolds, okay, that we're going to start submitting all of our software products, which is what we are, right? Our operating system, the management system, the cloud gateway, the pieces that we use, we're submitting those to third party for regression testing and penetration testing, so that we can get reports and we can improve where we need to improve, but we can also have reports that we can share with people so they can understand where the IGEL stands. And then, of course, insight. Insight is knowing what the device is doing, who's using the device. These are things that what's plugged into the device. These are all bits and pieces that we provide that make up the IGEL security model. So just a brief kind of go through that. I was going to take a minute here to talk about questions, but I think, I don't know, are there any questions about what we've covered so far at this point? Because I think people like to see the demo and probably move through that as quickly as we can.
Actually, there was a question that just came in, so we can go to that. So the question was, can one manage all kinds of clients from IGEL console, or does it need the IGEL Linux OS on it? I think that means the device for the console.
It does need the IGEL operating system on it. So that would be, yes, it needs to be an IGEL device. We do have we have agents for Windows and stuff for people who might want to monitor and do a little bit of some minor management of Windows, but for the most part, it's the IGEL OS is what we manage.
Okay, and the other part of that question is, can you operate the console itself from Android or Chrome, or is this a Windows utility? I think there might be a misunderstanding there.
It is, well, you can you can do it from Android if you connect to Citrix first.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, but it is a Windows-based.
But no, it is an application that runs on Windows and it runs on Linux. Okay.
Okay.
If you want to run it on OS 10 or you want to run it on Android or Chrome or iOS, it won't run on any. It doesn't run there. So, but you can run it on Linux. You can run it on Windows.
Okay. Then there was another question here that I think was pretty good, and that is, do you have a utility to determine if a desktop or laptop is compatible ahead of putting the converter on it, that sort of thing?
We do not have a utility. We have a database of components that we've qualified, the chipsets. So we tend to look at things from a chipset perspective. So, but I will tell you this: if the video chipset is either NVIDIA, AMD ATI, or Intel, okay, which is going to pretty much cover most of what's in the market today, we provide video drivers for all of their products. So unless the hardware is really, really old, okay, or extremely new, okay, you're going to have video support. Same thing with the network cards and wireless as well. So we're very much in tune with that.
Yeah, I think the other thing to say there, right, Jeff, is you don't need to convert a desktop to do that test, right? If you take something like the UD Pocket, you know, you're putting that USB key in. You are you're effectively changing the boot on that, and you're booting off that UD Pocket, and that gives you the ability to test that hardware, test the OS, test the management, without actually converting the underlying, you know, the operating system that's installed on that device. In fact, that's how I run. That's how I run today.
Right.
And you're of course running it on a Mac.
I am.
Yeah. So IGEL OS will run on a Mac as long as it's the x86 Mac. Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, one more question. Yeah, one more.
Uh-huh.
The question was, can you use the IGEL management utility for managing Android or iOS or Chrome devices?
No. I will say no. We have a mobile device management piece, okay, that today will manage iOS, but it doesn't do Android or Chrome.
Okay.
All right.
Perfect.
All right, moving on. So let's take a look at IGEL. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and shut this down, and we're going to start this little exercise here with an IGEL device. So what we're looking at on the desktop, hopefully you're seeing this okay. We are seeing an IGEL fresh out of the box. If we were to send you an IGEL, or we were to send you a UD Pocket, or you were to go to if you go to igel.com/download, okay, you can fill out a form and you'll get an email with instructions on how you can download our IGEL operating system installer, okay, and you could install the IGEL OS on an existing laptop or older machine or thin client or whatever the case may be. In my case, okay, this is, and I have an interesting setup here, but I'm actually connecting to the console of a virtual machine using RDP to show you a virtual IGEL device so that I can share this. But an IGEL out of the box, we get this, we look at it, it's all very familiar to us. We look at this, we say, wallpaper, I get it. Wallpaper, taskbar, I get it. Off on the right-hand side, I see a number, it looks like a time, okay? Left-hand side, we see things. This is very familiar to us. So knowing every technical person I've ever met is going to read all the documentation before they attempt to do anything with the technology they just got. You know, or they're going to sit there and look at this and say, you know what, this is familiar. I can do this. And they ultimately will say, hey, we've been trained since 1995 to think about this icon down here as potentially being a start menu. In fact, if I click on it, I do get a menu. And you probably would make your way into this little wrench guy here and gear, and you'll find something over here that looks very interesting. It says setup. So if I were just getting this and just starting to play, this would probably be where I'd start out. And I may or may not get anything done once I get to this. But the IGEL setup, I used to have people say, hey, I don't know anything about Linux. And of course, my response is, you know, Linux today is now the most dominant kernel in the market today. Linux-based operating systems dominate today, well ahead of Microsoft and anything that Microsoft brings to the table, because we see Linux everywhere. It's the hidden kernel. It's the hidden operating system, Android, Chrome OS, you know, your routers, your switches, your digital video recorders, your phones. I mean, just think about all the places where Linux sits today. The automobiles, every entertainment system on every plane is running Linux. You know, I just love watching them boot, me being a big Linux fan. So anyway, but you don't need to know Linux to work with the IGEL. what you need, you have a user interface that does everything for you. And this user interface is where everything begins and ends when it comes to configuring the IGEL device. If I want to go in and configure a connection to Citrix, okay, we organize this. Again, you read the documentation, you said, oh, there's a section called sessions. Sessions are things we connect to. I go in here, I want to work with Citrix, I can go down to Citrix, I can go down to Storefront, I can configure my connection to my store servers, okay, as easily as that. It's point and click, answer the questions, and you're on your way, okay. If I have an AS400, I want to connect to, I want to use 5250 to talk to that AS400, then we include IBM's access client for those people that have an IBM license to be able to use that. We have SSH connections, VNC viewer connections, we have resident browsers, we have media players. I mean, they're all tools that different people use for different purposes. No support for Improvada, Paradigm, all built into this firmware. Anything related to the user interface, I have a section here for user interface. Network, I have sections on network. So I can do all of my configuration inside here, and I'm not going to spend time on that because I don't get any value in managing a device on a one-off. What I want to be able to do is use the management system. So that being said, I'm going to bring up the management interface. When I look at this device, okay, well, this is the management system. Again, a little bit of orientation here for those that maybe have never seen it. Okay, it is an application. It's a three-tiered application. There's a server component, there's a console, a client component, which we call the MS console we're looking at here, and then there's a database component. The server will run on any version of Windows servers going back to 2008 and bringing it forward. Okay, it'll also run on Linux. So we support it on Red Hat and Oracle, and we support it on Ubuntu. Okay, it happens that my management system is actually running on Linux. The management console I'm using here is running on Windows. I'm connecting to my server that's running on Linux. Backend database, in my case, I'm using Apache Derby. But we support SQL Server clusters, Oracle, Oracle RAC, and Postgres in standalone and clustered modes. Why do we support clustered modes? Because this management system we're going to talk about, okay, has HA capability built into it, and you can interconnect management servers and databases and be active across different data centers on the planet, okay, and have everything working and people being able to access a single common database for managing all devices and still be able to control it. So menu bar across the top, okay, some icons, backward, forward, some other icons here that will become very familiar. There's a search area and navigation in the left. Okay. If I want to manage this device, one of the things I have to do is bring the device under management. So the first thing I'll do is I'm going to scan for thin clients. Okay, and when I scan for thin clients, we're going to give this this will be like a 6-second kind of wait here. And I'll see if I find any thin clients. With a little luck, I should find 2 of them. Okay, so here we go, and I'm going to go ahead and grab this first one here, and this one I'll grab them both and bring them both under management. We're successful right here. I'll click on OK. At this point in time, I now have this thin client here, okay, that I'm working with. I'll just double check the IP address of this device. So I'm going to go down here and find out we were sitting at 0.85. Come back over here and we see this device right here is 0.85 right here. Okay. If I want to manage this device, okay, I can go in here, I can double click it, I can right click and say edit the configuration. Now I'm going to edit the configuration of the device inside the management system. This comes on up. Okay. Same interface as if I was working on the device. So if I want to work with those sessions and configure Citrix, I can go here and do that. Or I can go down to the user interface. I can make a configuration change. I can go to the desktop because, you know what, I don't like blue background. I'd rather go with an orange background. I'll go ahead and select orange. I'll make that configuration change. I'll save that. That commits it to the management database. But it doesn't push the change to the thin client. Now, in many cases, people who've, depending on where you've come from, if you've worked with thin clients or some of the competitor solutions, the next step is perhaps to reboot the device. We don't have to do that. We can come over here and say, hey, I want to tell the thin client, I'll send a message to the thin client, tell that thin client to pull that configuration change down. So to do that, there's a message on the screen that says you got a configuration change, apply the changes now, okay, cancel, whatever. It's 12 seconds, 11. I'm going to go ahead and click on okay, give us back 10 seconds of our lives. It's applied that wallpaper's changed it from blue to orange. Didn't have to reboot the device. If the user had canceled that, not a big deal. It would either be pushed out by a job that I run later on, or the next time the device boots, it'll go ahead and apply that change. All right. Now, That's fine and good, but all I've done is trade sitting in front of the device or coming into the management system and configuring the device in a one-off. The value of the IGEL operating system and the IGEL management system comes into play when I now take a device, this device here, and I say, I want to deploy the device to my, for example, my Detroit office. So I'm going to take this device, I'm going to associate that device, okay, with an office called Detroit. And what's going on here? I talked about navigation inside this management system. One of the sections of navigation here was called thin client. This is where thin client devices live. Okay. Inside here, okay, I created some directories. I created a directory for a root directory for my enterprise. I called it enterprise, but it could be ABC company or XYZ company. Or it could be, I don't know, take your pick. It could be Disney, it could be MGM. It doesn't matter. But it's just a name. Okay. Inside there, I picked up regions in my case. You know, East, Central, Mountain, West, covering North America. I didn't put Atlantic in here. Okay. Inside East, I picked up different offices. This device is now residing in Detroit. Well, how does this device get its configuration? We use a concept of profiles. Think group policy. I've gone in and created snippets of a configuration, and by virtue of the device being associated with Detroit, when I look to the right-hand side of this management console, I see a series of descriptions down here. I see something that says Citrix Storefront. I see something that says Time Zone Eastern. I see something that says Shadow 80. I see something that says Small Icons, Time Server based configuration. What we do in the IGEL management system is you create that directory tree and you put snippets of the configuration, okay, on various objects inside this thin client directory tree. So at this point, I picked up Time Server because, you know what, we're defining the Time Server for everybody at my enterprise, okay? If I were to edit this object directly, I'm going to have that same interface that I've learned to know and love, and I can now move myself around. I know that setting time and date is something we do to a system. There's a section here called System. I come to Time and Date. It's here where I said, hey, I'm using a Time Server, and this is the Time Server I'm using. Of the 7,000 plus configurable items, many of which you never set anyway, but they're there if you need to set them. Okay, we can now come down here and I said, hey, these are the only 2 items that are part of this profile. I created a base configuration that does things like get rid of the setup utility, the ability for an end user to make any changes on the device. I've removed all those. I've done it, put a special screensaver on here. When I go back and look at the device, obviously see Detroit wallpaper. That setup utility, what I saw before, it's gone. It's not available to us because we took it away. Okay, again, the idea is you put a device in front of an end user. The end user has no ability to manipulate the device in any way, shape, or form. Or if you want to allow them to manipulate it with the ability to maybe set their own screen resolution, you know, and make those changes, they can do that. Okay, but that's a choice that you make. In the end, when I moved into the East, it's where I picked up Eastern Time Zone. Okay, a Citrix Storefront connection for the East, and then I went to Detroit and picked up Detroit wallpaper. If I take this device and say, hey, let's move this guy off to New York. Okay, I'll go ahead and move that off to New York. And as you can well imagine, okay, this device is simply going to get reconfigured for my New York office as quickly as that. If that user was on a plane from Detroit to New York and they were working with the device and they could be connected the entire way, they'd be able to use this device. You could apply that change while they're using it. It wouldn't interrupt the user. Most of the changes you would make to an IGEL configuration do not impact the user using the system. Okay, say for example, as an organization, we say, hey, we're going to go through some training, and Citrix, we don't want to put the load on the Citrix servers. It's just going to be web-based training. There's going to be no data stored locally. They're just going to connect and watch videos and answer a few questions, and it's all going to be based in a browser or some service from training.com or something. So what I want to say is, listen, let's create a profile, okay? So we call them profiles until they're applied to something, then they become kind of policies. But in the meantime, they're just a profile. So we want to have a training session here. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK and create a profile. And again, same interface, but this time I'm creating a browser session. I'm going to go down here to browser. I'm going to go down to a browser session. I'm going to go ahead and add a session. I'm going to call this, you know, training website. Okay, sorry I can't type when people are watching me. I'm going to go to the settings area, whoops, and I'm going to say I want to define the start page. So I'm going to start with the home page I define, and I'm going to come here. I'm going to say, let's go to https://www.training.com. I can then go in and control everything about how Firefox in this case works. Okay, so I can go in and I can set minimum encryption levels. I mean, this is powerful stuff. I won't allow anybody to connect anything less than TLS 1.2. When I'm done, I save that. I now have this profile. I want to deploy it to my enterprise. Okay, I may come down here and I drop it on enterprise, and I'll say now. And this will end up pushing that change to all my devices. And as quickly as that, we have the training website that we can connect to and run with. This is powerful, powerful stuff in terms of how devices get their configuration, because at the end of the day, no device is ever configured directly. It's all done through these profiles or policies. We go further, okay, by allowing people to, we will profile devices, profiling them differently, much like you would for network access control. We can look at an IGEL device when it boots on the network and it hits the management system, and then we can create a series of directory rules, okay, that based on parameters that I define, okay, we can have this device automatically place itself in this directory tree. It's powerful stuff. So this literally allows an organization, okay, to have 20,000, 30,000 devices, thousands of locations around the world, and have one person be responsible for this. These are numbers. These are numbers of scale of cost savings that are just crazy when you think about it. So, and this all comes through this management system, which is why everybody's so critically important for people. A lot of people say to me, hey, this is all great and good, Jeff, but at the end of the day, I just want the device to come up, okay, and I want it to look, I just want it to give me a login to my desktop. So I might come down here and say, hey, let's go ahead and go to, let me see if I can't find something good for us to connect to. Go to engineering. I think I have, oh my heavenly days. There's something under Citrix? I don't. Oh my heavens. I thought I might have a setup here that'd be real nice. I do apologize, where we would just turn the device into a terminal where it just boots up and presents a Citrix login. Okay. And you have that capability. It goes further and further and further in terms of what we're able to do. I mean, one of the things we talk about, we move away from the confines of AD and Active Directory and stuff like this. What happens to devices? What happens to certificate management? Okay. So when I go to my enterprise, one of the things that was kind of not mentioned here was the fact that in addition, okay, to configurations of wallpapers and everything else, I also deployed certificates to the device. We provide a lot of certificates, but people now want to be their own CA. We provide that ability to do that. All right. You have the ability, everything that's in here, okay, everything that you would expect in an enterprise class system is going to be available to you. Okay. Every object that's in here can have an access control list associated with it in terms of what somebody can or may not be able to do. So I can have help desk groups, I can have standard groups. Okay, if I can tie the management system into Active Directory. If you're still using eDirectory and want to use an LDAP server, we support that as well. I mean, there's so much that we do in here. But if I were to log back in as a help desk user, what happens is the help desk people have no access to devices in my enterprise, except we've denied their ability to move and edit and do anything related to the device. They can browse and look for them, and they can shadow them. That's all they can do. If I log in as a help desk user, I come into this profile area, which is where all the configuration lives. And if I look at the access control list there, and I look at help desk, I find out they have no access. Again, no ability for help desk users to do it. They can interface with the system for purposes of providing support, but they can't change configuration. We have the ability to create views. Views are different ways of looking at those systems. So I could say, which devices are Intel NUCs, okay, that are running the IGEL operating system? Which devices have a particular BIOS? Okay, which devices are non-IGEL devices? Okay, which devices have old firmware? I mean, it goes and goes and goes in terms of these kinds of views. And then somebody says, hey, give me all the thin clients that have been offline for more than 30 days. I can come in there and right click and I can say, okay, here you go. I'm going to go ahead and send you these results in an email, and I can put in an email address and give you a little report just like that. In fact, we provide mechanisms to automate that process of sending out reports on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, whatever you choose to do. so much here. Everything in the audit trail. Okay, we have logging capabilities. Okay, we have the ability to do secure shadowing. So we turn on secure shadowing. We encrypt the shadowing profile, the VNC protocol that's pushed across there. There's so much to share, so much that we do here with this device and this operating system. So that being said, I think I'll stop. This is a little bit of a flavor here in terms of what we can do with IGEL. It's powerful, powerful stuff. I will say this, people say, hey, we want to use Chrome. We don't want to use Firefox. We built in technology that allows people to use Firefox or to replace Firefox with Chrome. We have users that have done digital signage using Chrome behind the scenes to do some extra programming stuff. Very interesting solutions using the IGEL device, okay, as a solution box or a box for an operating system for creating managed solutions. So in addition to Citrix, there can be some kind of different use cases as well. In fact, we're exploring a few of those down at Citrix headquarters. I'll stop. Any questions here? Because I think we're coming up against the time, and I do apologize.
Yeah, got a couple. And if anyone out there has additional questions, go ahead and type them in now. But one question was, can policies be assigned dynamically based on IP ranges?
Yes. Yes. What would happen is based on IP range, you would create a directory tree, okay, and the devices would be placed automatically, and then they would inherit those settings at that point.
Okay, and I have a follow-up question to that too, just on my end. So is there a way to make additional contexts? So if they are, for example, part of a one profile, but they happen to be part of a different IP range, for example, would there be a way to kind of prioritize which of those gets the policies?
I don't know if I fully get that question, but policies go ahead.
Yeah, so if the device itself has multiple contexts, would there be a way to have one context override the other context? So if they're like using the IP as an example.
I think where you'd run into that, okay, is there are a couple of things that we can do, and this is where I've been running Linux. I'm one of the 1%. I tell people today because I've been using Linux as my primary OS since going back to, good heavens, 2000 at this point. So I'll come back to what you can do with Linux and what makes it so powerful. But when we create these profiles, when we profile a device, okay, much like you would with any device, we can come in and say, okay, I want to go ahead and create a set of rules when I'm going to evaluate a device. Okay, so I might come in and I might start with IP address or something specific about the device. I've got IP addresses, I've got unit IDs, I've got branches, cost centers, I have a key store alias. I've got a variety of baseball affiliates. Okay, these are, again, we provide lots of tools for people to put their own information in here if they will. When was it last booted? What's the monitor connected to? This is a really interesting one. What is the brand of monitor as we connect to this device? We can now take this and we can create these rules. Okay. Now, once we create a rule, okay, we can then get inside of additional rules that are sub rules, if you will. Okay, so that you can create and or conditions and conditional kind of steps. So we'd have to have a discussion around specifically what somebody wants to accomplish, because how you set up the directory rules probably would solve the problem. Gotcha. Even with all that, we have the ability to assign profiles based on views. I showed you the views, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I can create a view, and then I can say, hey, here's a profile that's associated with that view. Okay, and using that, okay, and using some of the automation functions, the job functions as well, these devices will pull configurations based on other kinds of parameters.
Awesome. A couple other questions here. One is a fairly decent one, actually. What are the Microsoft license implications when running WinPC converted to IGEL Linux? It goes on with Microsoft SA, VDI use rights are included at no charge for that Windows endpoint, but loading IGEL is no longer running Windows. Does that mean the $100 a year MSVDA license must be used then?
Yeah, well, or so this is an interesting, right? So Microsoft, I've always said Microsoft wants to get their money. So whatever it is you're going to do, if you kind of step back and say, well, Microsoft wants their money. So yes, if you're not using a Windows operating system, if you don't have a solution assurance in there for that device, and there's no VDA or no access license as well, I mean, then you're going to have to pay the VDA. Okay. There was a period of time when if that machine was just under software assurance, it really didn't matter what operating system you had under there, but because you were still following the letter of the law, it's just you chose not to have that operating system out there. Microsoft is interesting because there are some offerings, and they offered some discounts if you had, say, any kind of Windows. It used to be you had to have some enterprise or higher level version of Windows on the endpoint to be able to get the ability to use that, to connect that VDA at no cost, the virtual environment at no cost. They've come back on that some, and now they've said, hey, listen, if you have any Windows operating system, you can connect and get a discount. Problem is, it's not ever really clear. I connect with my Android device to Windows all the time, but my phone, and yet I'm not paying for that.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know how when all of us carry multiple, I mean, I have like 5 or 6 devices that I can connect to Windows with. And I'm sure a lot of us on this call are in that same boat. So how does Microsoft handle that? Well, you do get some of the user licensing. And I do go back to what we saw with Microsoft's approach with the Windows, virtual desktop, and disbanding the Windows 10 group. I mean, they haven't given it up, but Android's the dominant operating system now.
Yeah, so there's lots of ins and outs there. Yeah, for sure. So let me get to a couple other questions, and then we can kind of wrap this up here. The other one was, and get ready for this, Jeff, because we get this in every single one, but are there plans to support Raspberry Pi endpoints or anything that's running on an ARM processor?
Somebody might want to go to Disrupt, and maybe they might learn something.
There you go.
That's a very good answer, Jeff.
Good one. Yeah. And then another one is where are the IGEL settings stored? Is it cached locally on the devices, or is there a local data? Is a database that has to be online for those settings to be live? I think is the question there.
No, actually, so since we're here, and so I always leave back doors on my IGEL device when we're doing these things, so people might ask these questions, right? So we have a directory called WFS, okay, which is where the configurations are stored. This is a writable of all IGEL is done in a series of partitions. Okay, the only partition, okay, that we allowed to be written to, okay, on a device that's properly locked down is this WFS directory. And it can only be written to under control of the operating system. Okay, so we have a daemon that commits any changes in here. But this group.ini file, okay, represents the configuration on the device. That combined with setup.ini. So for people who don't know, or if they're curious, setup.ini, it's a little XML file that says, hey, this is the management server. Okay, this is, remember I changed the wallpaper to red or orange. That's where we see this. This is the host name that was created for the device, and this is the video driver. So those are the 2 files. They are on the device. Okay, changes, they're stored there. It's not accessible by the runtime user. It's only accessible by root, okay, or by the system. So when it's properly locked down, it's secure as possibly can be, but you don't need the management system. Once it has a configuration, if the management system were offline, everything runs perfectly.
Yeah, okay. And then there's 2 questions that are here that are kind of related to that, so I'll just ask them real quick. The first one is, how do you handle devices that are off the network that you want to control? And yeah.
I
think it's talking about the cloud-based
the cloud gateway
storage. Yeah, the cloud gateway.
Well, okay. Let's go to the other question related to that. What's the next question?
Yeah, so the next
I'll show you
question
that
is
real quick.
kind of similar. It's like when a new device is brought online, can it automatically be discovered by the management software?
Yeah.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I scan for thin clients because it's easy, it's there, and everybody gets it. Okay. But in truth, nobody scans for thin clients in production. Okay, so every IGEL device that boots, okay, the first thing we try to do is find the management server using DNS. So we ask people to add an A record, an address record to DNS, okay, that resolves the name IGEL RM server and point to the management server. Okay, now when an IGEL device boots, okay, it'll reach out to that management server. Okay, if it's brand new and it's out of the box and I've gone into that little step that everybody asks about, can I automatically register these devices, and I turn that on, now the device out of the box, okay, will find that, if it can find that management server, it will place itself under management, and that's it. And if you have profiles and rules in place, it'll come up the first time as if it's always been there.
Yeah, awesome.
If it's outside and it's off network, that of course is off network. And if we go off network and I want to do this, okay, let's see how this thing, I have a device coming up. One of the beautiful things that's about Citrix, or we've got going on, is that Citrix we actually have set up an IGEL Cloud gateway, okay, and an IGEL management system on Citrix's demo cloud. And so using an IGEL device, if you were to convert a device, or if I had a UD Pocket, or we were visiting somewhere and you wanted to experience an IGEL device connected to a Citrix environment, as soon as the system comes back up, we'll get a pure reset to defaults. And we have a little wizard that the user walks through, okay? And as soon as it walks through this, we come back up, I'll go ahead and they'll have an opportunity to say, this is the cloud gateway I want to connect to. At that point in time, I have an opportunity to enter something called a structure tag. A structure tag is a classification for how the device should be configured. Okay. Yeah. As it comes up, I'll show it to you. It's might have bogged down my system here.
But
Yeah,
ultimately, the cloud gateway it allows remote devices to communicate securely over the web back to a management center that is behind the DMZ, right? The cloud gateway sat in the DMZ as a secure appliance and is allowing it's proxying that connection, that communication.
Yeah, and then just to add to that, just a little color, if you're using like a UD Pocket, you can basically configure those centrally and send those out as you need to. So we're up against time here, but I did want to make one observation here. Somebody was mentioning that they are running a proof of concept with an IGEL UD2 right now, and they were watching this entire webinar on the UD Pocket. And we're the UD2 was very impressed with the performance, so I just wanted to say that. But I'm going to turn this over to Stephanie. She's going to take us out for the day.
All right, thanks. Thanks, guys. Thanks for being with us today. Thanks to all the attendees, and thanks Simon and Jeff for walking us through everything and for the demo, and thanks DJ for keeping track of all those questions. I think we got to most of the questions. If we did not, I'll forward those on to Jeff and Simon after the webinar and make sure we get an answer for you. And we'll post those out in the CUGC forums. I threw a link in the chat for everyone. There is a survey. It's for us. It's short and quick and just for our use only. So love to have you guys fill that out. It helps us plan content for future webinars. And I think Jeff and Simon, did you have a link? There it is. I see it. I will put it in the main chat.
We do. Yeah. If anyone wants to subscribe to our communications, there is a link that we've got there. We'll cross-reference anybody that signs up using that link today with their list. The list that we've got from the attendance of this webinar, and they then go into that draw. And on the 19th of December, when we announce our customer success video winners, we'll also announce who is the winner from this webinar that gets the all expenses paid trip. But yeah, just subscribing to that is worthwhile anyway. The other thing to note is there is obviously a IGEL community that many of your attendees might want to join as well, run by the infamous Douglas Brown. So yeah, igel.com/community. That's a Slack channel, and that has been gaining momentum over the last 12 months as well. So feel free to join that, particularly if you're like that customer was evaluating the software at the moment, because obviously there's a whole wealth of knowledge and interaction that goes on that Slack channel.
All right. All right, well, those links are out there for you, and we'll make sure that we have that link in the follow-up email that you guys will get tomorrow, with a link to the recording, and we'll include all this information in that as well. So with that, I think we can let you guys go. Thanks again to everyone, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Stephanie and DJ. Thank you.
Certainly
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.